For everyone who is listening to the podcast. I have Daniel here with me. He's the co-founder and CTO at Lindro, ex-head of cloud security at Lyft, ex-Amazon, ex-Red Hat. Name any other security company out there, and he probably has done some work for them. And Daniel, welcome to the show. And yeah, feel free to introduce yourself. It would be great if you can give me a background about your entire professional journey.
Thanks for having me here. Yeah, cool. So let me start a little bit. I mean, you already gave the quick rundown on
Mhm.
myself. I can maybe start from the early on to where I'm now a little bit to give you like a guide there that I followed. So I was already like early on quite interested in computers and started then programming. I came along just HTML, started like building some websites and all of that. Then I learned that there's this thing called PHP, and that's how everything got started. It's I'm not proud of it by today's standards, but I think that's basically how everyone gets
Sure.
gets into something. And then I started building browser games back then. So I built
Hmm.
things at high school, and then like my classmates were also playing those games. Even convinced some of the teachers to start playing it. It was fun times.
Nice.
And so after high school, I progressed and started at AWS directly. And there I built a service called AWS OpsWorks. It doesn't exist anymore. Some of you might have used it back then. It was back then in times when containers weren't a thing yet. It was kind
Mm.
of like a competitor to Heroku.
Oh.
Quite exciting. Doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately, but was extremely interesting to see it
Hmm.
like grow, build, and basically to stand up something from the ground to see it used over time and
Hmm.
then unfortunately not make it. Um, but there I was already quite excited every time we interacted with security, and security was already like fascinating to me in that regard. Like when we had to build like a threat model and something came in, it was like a little bit like hush hush, and you have to patch this because it can be dangerous and all of this.
Sure.
And so that sparked my joy for
Mm.
security more and more. And so I decided to move on then my career, and I joined briefly CoreOS, which
Hmm.
got then bought, unfortunately, like a month later by Red Hat. So I was again back to big corporate.
Mm.
But there I went in deeper into security. I got fascinated by certificates and securing connections. And that's basically also what led me then to HashiCorp, which was
Mm.
my next step. So there I was then part of the Vault team. But I quickly again moved on to the Vault Cloud team to stand up then HCP Vault Cloud because of my prior knowledge with AWS and so. And that basically set then the trajectory quite clear
Mm.
for security. After that, we moved on to a smaller cybersecurity firm called CloudQuery.
Hmm.
They built an inventory over everything cloud you have, and then you were able to reason about what you have there. And the last 3.5 years, I was then the head of cloud security at Lyft,
Mm.
where I built their cloud security program, also built an internal CSPM that was able to
Mm.
cope with the immense size of infrastructure we had at Lyft and
Hmm.
their unique problems or solutions that I had to design for. And end of last year, I decided then
Mm.
to exit my role, and now I'm building something myself again in the realm of cybersecurity, specifically in cloud security.
Nice. And you mentioned about certificates, uh, wherein you encountered it during your work. And was that the point where cloud security became sort of a main area of focus for you in your career?
So at the very beginning, I would say I started quite early with clouds. I think I started already when I was still in high school around 2010, 2011. I had my first AWS account and
Mm.
played with it. I mean, back then security wasn't really a thing. Also,
Sure.
at the time I started AWS myself to join there. it wasn't my priority. I mean, it was
Mm.
also my first position ever. But to be honest, so we had an internal tool at Amazon, and that was vending certificates. You were able
Ah,
to bind them to services. And I was fascinated how easy it was working. I mean, now you have AWS Certificate Manager and all of
sure,
this. We had this internal, and it was extremely cool because I mean, if you used back then, you didn't have AI, right? So you went to Stack Overflow, you checked on like this super annoying long OpenSSL commands, like how to issue
sure.
a certificate, and we had at Amazon like this internal thing. And
Ah,
you were
okay.
just able to say, like, this is my host name, I'm in this organization, issue this thing and bind it. And I was somehow fascinated by this. I mean, I only did this like every half year or so because like,
Mm-hmm.
but somehow that triggered me to look more closely into how security works and how can I make
Mm-hmm.
security also easy to use because it was just so simple.
Mm. And we've been talking a lot about security for someone from a non-technical and non-security background. How do you describe security, especially cloud security?
Hmm. That's a fun one. Like every time I go to a conference or so, and I say that I work in cloud security, I get an ask. That's cool. Like, what do you do then about your vulnerabilities and your
Mm.
application security? And I mean, to some, it might be that that's cloud security or that you just do security in the cloud. I don't know. To me, it's like something completely different. It's more your infrastructure security. So
Mm.
your configuration of your critical infrastructure. So your different hyperscalers, your AWS, your
Mm.
GCP, your Azure, but maybe also your Google Workspace or your
Mm.
GitHub. That is all cloud for me. Your critical infrastructure that you have to configure and you have so many ways to configure it wrong. Basically, already by creating things by default, they're usually wrong and insecure configured. And that is somewhat what fascinates me also about cloud security. It's it's so simple to screw it up.
Mm.
You can just have something and you can live with it, and you're happy that you got something. You have your EC2 instance. It's reachable by everyone. But yeah, it's reachable by everyone. And that is also like the problem on the other hand, right?
So, and with the LLMs and AI agents and so-called autonomous AI agents sort of coming in, uh, what's the real problem of cloud security like in today's world?
So that's I would say one that not too many can answer yet, or maybe nobody.
Okay.
I mean,
Mm.
it's like this evolution that is currently happening. I mean, there's so many aspects on it, but I would say the kind of like uh, path that everyone should
Hmm.
go when writing infrastructure or when modifying infrastructure, you should do infrastructure as code. And I mean that was basically
Mm.
paved with tools like Terraform, now OpenTofu or
Sure.
Pulumi and
Mm.
others. And I mean back then when those tools came up, nobody knew yet really how to use them. And then like
Mm.
you found those guides again on Stack Overflow and others and then you were super happy that you found like a template and you just copy it in
Yeah.
and it worked. But you didn't, or most probably didn't reflect right ahead, like what implications does it have? And
Sure.
I mean, the fun thing is, I mean, same with application security, but I think even more with cloud security if you don't add certain code in application security, right, you can also make things unsecure. So that it's even more prominent in infrastructure as code that if you leave out like all those optional fields,
Mm.
you get something, but probably it's not what you're going to want really, because then it's not like using encryption by default. Maybe it's public
Mm.
and not private. Maybe it doesn't have retention or whatever. So there's like this myriad of options that you have, and they're all options. You don't
Sure.
have to set them. And I think when this started with, for example, Terraform, I mean, people were able now to write deterministic infrastructure. That's good, but it didn't necessarily lead to better quality infrastructure. And now with AI, it's quite interesting. I mean, people use their Claude Code or their Codex or Cursor or whatever, and they say like, build me this piece of software, right? And it
Mm,
does. On the other side, it also then produces, for example, the Terraform or Pulumi or whatever. And I would say the baseline probably became slightly better
mm,
because the AI was trained on all this slop that we produced over the last 10, 15 years on Stack Overflow and maybe got like the baseline right so that
mm,
things should maybe have encryption by default if it's not like costing extra or something like this. But the problem is also the stakes rose than higher. So your
mm,
baseline is probably better than like an unknowledged developer that doesn't really care. But also the stakes are way higher that your agent decides to take a shortcut because
mm,
that's what AI does, right? Like if AI says, "Oh, I have this one microservice and I have this other microservice, and they can't talk with each other," why not just make it public then, right? Then they can just talk with each other. So they
mm,
take those shortcuts, and that's then something, especially if you also produce then 50,000 other lines of code. You will just not catch this in your Terraform, then that you suddenly opened
sure.
everything up to the public. Or even worse, like with all those examples that you see over the last weeks and months, that an agent thinks they have access to a staging environment by having
Mm,
direct access through CLIs or so. But unfortunately, it wasn't staging, it was production, and now your database is gone. And so the stakes are way higher. I mean, before developers also whatever wiped the whole database during their on-call session or whatever because humans make errors and agents make errors. The problem is just humans made errors in human speed. The agents make basically the same errors in machine speed, and
mm.
you cannot catch up with that. And so the stakes just went up.
Sure. And then, given the fact that these LLMs are trained on la on public data that's available to a great extent, so it would mean that it's in a better position to sort of analyze these loopholes within a cloud application. So that sort of brings me to my next question regarding, has it become harder, or rather has cloud security sort of become harder for companies who use, let's say, Kubernetes or AWS, because the configurations are already out there, and Codex, when you ask Codex or Cloud Code to generate these configurations, it more or less generates along those lines because it's been trained on the same amount of data.
Correct. So exactly, that basically plays towards the baseline gets better.
Mm,
But I mean, the problem there is also in general, cloud is just becoming like every day more complicated. I mean, when I started, for example, you were still able to count the AWS services like
sure.
with
Yeah,
your
yeah,
fingers, right? It was like a
sure,
single digit number. Now you have I don't know, and probably if I say a number today, it's wrong tomorrow.
sure.
And I mean, I'm not saying the agents cannot keep up with this, and probably they can
Mm,
do that quite well if you, especially if you install then whatever the AWS documentation
mm,
MCP or something like this. So that is not the problem. The problem is here, I would clearly say that the tooling is still optimized for human in a loop, but the human is just not able to keep up with that pace and
mm,
then basically just clicks accept, right? I mean, we're back to the
sure.
cursor problem, just like hit,
Exactly.
hit, yes, 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 yes,
Yeah.
yes, right? And I mean, how should you even cope up with the speed? Like,
Mm,
I don't know how many new services launch like every year, like at reInvent or like I have no idea how many are right now with Azure and others.
sure.
Like, how can you humanly keep up with the pace there? Also, like, do you use now SCPs or RCPs or like how do you even prevent things? I mean, like also like how extensive IAM policies are
Mm,
nowadays, like with each
exactly.
provider also completely different. I mean, the good thing is AI makes it now easier to grasp,
Mm,
but you also need to ask the right questions. And you still have also, in most cases, not really the chance to validate that that's actually then true, right? I mean, if you give it like a super complicated IAM policy, you can ask it, what is it doing? But is it really telling you the whole story, or is it
mm,
right? Just like optimizing then for the output for the human, that the human can grasp it better and maybe is swallowing then some of the details.
True. True.
So I would say the biggest problem is you cannot grasp it anymore as a human, and
Mm,
you need to rely then to some degree on the AI. But to me, that is kind of like hope is your strategy, and that is
mm.
never really like a good strategy.
Fair, fair. On the flip side, how do you think AI agents are sort of acting as a supporting factor for cloud security?
Absolutely, and I mean that's where it shines. I would just say you cannot rely on it solely, but it's super interesting to give it like basically this unstructured data that you have, and
Hmm.
then ask it to make sense out of it. So something you as a human wouldn't have caught immediately. To give you an example here, with the startup I'm building, I'm also building myself like there's some test cases to show in
Mm,
demos. So I created, for example, this IM user called Bob. And then I signed into like in as Bob, so I assume Bob basically is role. And then I created a security group rule in an existing security group that pointed an egress towards an IP address in China.
mm,
And then I also went into an S3 bucket and I made it public. And then I signed off. And then I was using my tool to basically and ask it like through Claude
mm,
because you can use my thing then through an MCP. And asking what was Bob up to? I think something is wrong with Bob. And then it was checking. Okay, so Bob, okay, he signed in, all good. Okay, he made this bucket then public. That's quite strange. Oh my God, you need to immediately revoke his credentials. Bob created like egress and opened it up to an IP address, and I looked it up and it's in Shanghai somewhere. So clearly Bob wants to exfiltrate data
mm,
and in your security called super secret production and so on. So immediately you need to revoke Bob's access
mm,
and this and that. That's like a clear MITRE attack XYZ and so on. And
mm.
it's just so I was just sitting there and having like a laugh because that was just hilarious, right? Because I
True.
constructed this, but like how much like the AI went into this role play and said, "Oh my
Exactly.
God, you need to revoke Bob and all of this." And I mean, if I think about this, like just like going back 12 years ago, how hard it would have been for me with existing tooling, with a SIM or whatever, to figure out what Bob did, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And here it took me, I don't know, like 5 tool calls or something like this. And after like a minute, it did like this root cause analysis with clear recommendation on what I should
Mm,
do next. But still, you need to use your own brain and also basically decide if all of what the AI is producing to you is actually right. It's not getting itself a little bit too deep into the weeds and then constructing a
mm,
case that doesn't exist. But I mean, what's quite exciting to some degree. I mean, I'm not completely sold on the idea to have agents running like freely around and doing all
fair.
the things.
Yeah,
But on the other side, I mean, for example, what OpenClaw showed, just like a stupid cron, right, that runs every 15 minutes or so,
yeah.
that gets the data and still has a little bit of memory, how much liveness it can produce. And if you think about you have then, let's just say it's a cron job and it's just getting the data of the last 15 minutes, maybe like the most critical events, violations, maybe sign-ins or whatever. And then you just let this thing run and reprocess what happened over the last X amount of time.
Mm,
This thing can find them patterns, like if they keep like reappearing. I don't know, like every day one of your employees screws up one thing, and
mm,
suddenly he screws the same thing up like twice, and then like 3 times or so, and then you see, okay, there's a clear pattern. Maybe someone wants to exfiltrate data, or maybe someone wants to harm the company, or whatever.
mm,
That's stuff you can also detect in different ways. I mean, that's what we had machine learning for like all those years. I mean, it's not new, but it's way easier to find out data now that is basically unstructured. So you
mm.
you can find things that you don't know that you even want to know. And that's where it's quite exciting.
Nice. And you mentioned about Kubernetes in one of the during the beginning of the conversation, and you also worked on Kubernetes infrastructure at CoreOS and Red Hat. So in the current state of the art, with the rate at which Kubernetes is growing, do you think that it has made security harder or at the same time better, or not really, or probably both?
I would say both, but like
Okay.
to put it with this quote, so Kubernetes made easy things hard and hard things possible. And
Yeah.
that's basically also the same with
Mm.
security. So Kubernetes is something I still wouldn't recommend, like your run-of-the-mill startup that just wants to get something out of the door, for example.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
should just get like back then it was Heroku, now it's
Yeah,
like the Superbase or something like this.
sure.
But you can do things with Kubernetes that haven't been possible easily
Mm.
before. I mean, it's still not easy,
Yeah.
but it's possible. And the problem there is also getting the security there right is unbelievably complicated because I mean we before had servers. So we hardened those, right? We
Yeah.
ensured like the Linux, the OS, like everything was safe and that we didn't expose ports and all of that, that the application was good and everything was patched. Then we built cloud. So now you have then cloud, you have like your IAM, you have your security groups, you have like a new layer to screw things up, and you still need to harden your
Mm.
your host. And now we have our cloud, and on our cloud runs the server. We have to harden both of them, and now we put a Kubernetes on that we also need to harden. That runs now a pod, which runs again like a Linux that needs to be also hardened at some degree.
Mm.
So we're just adding more and more and more layers. I mean,
Yes.
it gets more high level every time, but it
Mm.
adds extremely complexity. And I
Mm.
think as if cloud wasn't already hard enough, now you also need to do the same with Kubernetes. So I would say overall, it's harder, but it opened up the possibilities that weren't possible before, and you just need to take the risk of the complexity
Mm.
to sustain that kind of load or growth. So that's why basically, if you don't need it, don't use it. If you
Mm.
need it, you have to take that risk. It's like a clear risk appetite kind of
Mm.
thing.
So keep it small as much as you need for now.
Exactly.
Fair. And yeah, so what do you think would cloud security teams they would look like, let's say 5 years down the line, or even 2 years down the line, given the fact that there's more and more LLMs that are more advanced coming up?
I mean, that's a fun one. I mean, that's basically the vision that I'm anticipating. And if you view it like this, we wrote our code ourselves. Then we
Mm.
copied the code from Stack Overflow. Then we started using ChatGPT. We prompted it, and then we copy pasted code. Then we had Cursor. So we did then this tap, tap, tap thing, right? So now before
Sure.
we Copilot, then was Cursor, and then and now we have fully agentic coding. So almost nobody of us writes a single line of code really themselves anymore.
Exactly.
Instead, they just prompt into it. I was extremely reluctant. I'm also not completely sold, probably like almost everyone. But here's the thing. I mean, it's producing you still human readable code. I mean, that is
Sure.
like code that was, or like a language that was invented to make humans interact with machines more
Sure.
efficient. And we're producing so much code now that we're anyhow not reviewing the code anymore.
Exactly.
So what gives? So why should the AI keep actually producing human readable code if
Mm.
humans then use CodeRabbit or GrabTile, whatever, to review the human readable code by a machine again? So hot take. That is basically just an intermediate that we have now, and then your AI is just either going to write some binaries itself,
Mm.
and or your AI or LM or what it will be just runs on your infrastructure. And then what is left is basically infrastructure, which is kind of like cloud security, and maybe your web application firewall.
Mm.
So that they basically you will still need your hard drives and databases for persistence and your compute to run that. but why do you need this intermediate, like of a binary or whatever,
Mm,
if the AI couldn't just sit there? And then you just ensure that the hard drives are spinning, the database are roaring, and you have
mm,
enough compute to sustain it. And you have a web application firewall that ensures you're not like getting garbage in and garbage out, or you're exfiltrating user data or so. So that's kind of like what I would say in 5 years. Maybe it's also just 2 months in the future. I have no
yeah.
idea. Maybe it's also bullshit and it's not going to happen how I say it. But I would say that's probably the next evolution that AppSec
Mm,
and Vuln and they become less relevant in the future, and it's more about protecting your AI, protecting your
mm,
infrastructure, and basically the input-output stream of what happens actually in your cloud.
nice. And yeah, and for someone who just want to sort of start building a serious career in cloud security or s- any form of computer security, what's your advice for them?
I mean, I initially didn't expect or plan to have one in security. I know there's like this clear trajectory
Mm,
of engineers that go like the security realm or so. But I would say most important is to just like be curious and have a reason why to do that.
mm,
So I mean, I built browser games to start with, and then I
yeah,
made my way somehow. I like I don't really learn through courses or so on. I don't have any certification or
mm,
anything. I just bought things or acquired things or whatever, like signed up at like a cloud provider. Like I just used my pocket money back then that I got. I got this prepaid credit card and created
mm,
myself an AWS account while I was still in high school, just to play around. And I mean, I didn't got it back then to break things. I was just curious, like how does it work, like compared to uh, I mean, previously you either got web hosting, which is like super awkward if you think about this nowadays, and or you bought yourself like a V server or something like this. So
yeah,
I wanted to try out new things. So you need to be like extremely curious and basically chase the next thing that gets you
mm.
further. So basically, like build things, break things, be happy about it. Just be curious.
All right. Thanks a lot, Daniel, for your thoughtful discussion. This is really helpful for today. And yeah, thank you so much for the overall discussion.